Okay, everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Jeff Simon. I'm president of SocialFlight. SocialFlight, if you don't already know, is a free mobile app and web community that supports general aviation by giving people, pilots, more reasons to fly and things to do. We've cataloged over 15,000 events since we started, 200,000 $100 hamburgers and things to do all over the world, and over 100 videos and webinars through SocialFlight University, all part of the app, which includes things like what we have tonight that we'll be recording here. And all the services that these free services that we provide to general aviation are made possible by companies such as Continental Motors. And we are very thankful for that, very appreciative, and very happy to welcome Bill Ross from Continental Motors this evening, Director of Product Support and Continental Motors Services. We've done a series before of webinars and educational videos from a number of companies, and certainly also from Continental Motors. They're really educational and a great source of information. And so thank you all again for coming. Thanks to Bill Ross for doing this and to Continental Motors. And also feel free to post any questions that you have along the way through the chat window as part of this online service. We will respond to those as we go through, but mainly at the end. And so ask any questions you can. We'll answer what we can. And again, this evening's presentation will be recorded and will be available through SocialFlight, whether that be the mobile app on your phone, tablet, or on the web. And just go in there, click on SocialFlight University, and you'll be able to view this and all the other webinars that have been presented. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Bill, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. And first off, I want to thank everyone out there for your attendance tonight and taking time out of your day to listen to me for the next 45 minutes to an hour. On behalf of Continental Motors, we really appreciate that. Also, thanks to Jeff and SocialFlight for making these webinars possible. Best thing is that they are free, and they are all geared to support general aviation with education, and certainly great places to fly with our aircraft. I look at these webinars and public speaking, doing educational seminars throughout the country at various events, air shows and trade shows and things like that, and I really view it as one of the great highlights of my job to get out and to be able to speak to aircraft owners and pilots and operators. A little bit about myself. I have been working with Continental Motors for 14 years. I learned to fly actually before I could drive a car, and it's certainly in my blood. I've worked as a mechanic, as a corporate pilot, and I've worked here at Continental Motors within engineering, analytical, and product support. And now I have the privilege of working with some of the most professional people in the industry at Continental Motors Services, which I'll talk more about a little later in the presentation, which is our MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility that we've created in order to serve our end customer better. The purpose of tonight is to talk about exploring your options at TBO, and it's the first in a series of webinars that we'll be doing over the course of the next few months with SocialFlight. All are geared to provide information to our end customer, our owners, and pilots. So we certainly want you to go to our website or go to SocialFlight to look at those topics, and those that you find interesting, we certainly hope that you'll join us for that series of webinars as we continue. Tonight, though, we're going to talk about exploring options as our engines approach TBO. There's a lot of proponents out there of of TBO that it is something that we don't have to target, it's something that we don't have to be concerned with, and that we should fly completely on condition. And in some of the thought, I believe it is that we continue to fly until it breaks. Well, unfortunately, that's not the correct answer, I don't think. Somewhere in between, I think, lies the truth, and hopefully we can, over the next two parts, this is a two-part series, we'll be able to provide some meaningful information to those out there that are considering repowering your airplane with either a Lycoming or Continental powered. But there are a few things that I intend to cover and objectives that I want to do tonight. The first is to understand what TBO is, time before overhaul. Why is it important? What does it mean? And are we compelled to comply with that manufacturer's recommendation? When we get to TBO or beyond, what are our engine options? There are many terms out there that are used, and hopefully we can define those exact terms and what they mean so that people can make an informed decision when they're considering that repower of the airplane. The engine process, what's the process in the different selections that we have going forward. And we'll cover those three topics tonight in detail. And then the three bullets that we'll cover in part two are the hurdles that we'll face. One of them may be financially. I know at my home I have a gatekeeper of the checkbook. That's my wife, and when it comes to our airplanes, I have to go to the altar, if you will, or ask for purchase orders for things for the airplanes. I am, like many of you, an aircraft owner, and so I do understand both the enjoyment and some of the pitfalls in aircraft ownership. So we have to make reasonable choices, good choices when it comes to our airplane, and not waste money, but spend it wisely. The next bullet in part two we'll talk about is when we do repower the airplane with an engine, there will be certain items that need to be inspected or repaired and associated with an engine replacement. So we'll talk about that. And then probably one of the most important aspects of repower is the installation, that it's done properly and it's done by a competent mechanic that understands how that engine should be installed and set up, and we'll talk about that in great detail in part two. Well, let's jump right into TBO, or time before overhaul, and what do we mean by that? What is it that we're trying to do? Under federal regulations of aircraft certification or engine certification, us being Continental Motors, the manufacturer, are compelled to publish a time before overhaul. And it is a time that we establish based upon data that we come in from during the design, the testing, the certification of the engine, and we look at engines over time with typical use and typical maintenance intervals. Continental across the board just increased the TBOs on most engine models across the board 200 hours. Again, it's TBO is not a four-letter word. We did so through lots of testing and lots of data that we gathered in order to do that and prove to the FAA that we could do it. And I'll talk more about that in just a little later on in the presentation. But that's how we derive it at TBO, and that's how we give that recommendation to the FAA. Now, TBO is important from a number because regulatorily we're bound, but more importantly, we have to look at TBO and look at the life and age issues of the engine as a whole. You know, gaskets tend to deteriorate over time. O-rings can crack and dry out and wear and things like that. You can have wear in the engine. But in the next two bullet points with low hours and high hours, I want to kind of compare and contrast those items because I hear this a lot. Well, my engine's very low time. It only has 350 hours since major overhaul or since factory new. What they leave out is that occurred in 1966. And an engine that is that old can be problematic from corrosive attack because of the low hours. Believe it or not, I think one of the worst things that you can do to an aircraft engine is have it sit and not use it. So any of you that want to write a note to my wife and tell her that I need more of an avgas allowance, it would be greatly appreciated. But low hours can be detrimental to the engine in corrosive attack, and we have to be very concerned about the length of time it's been since the engine was inspected and gone through. On the flip side of that, high hours can wear an engine past service limits as published by Continental Motors, the manufacturer, or Lycoming, whoever is the manufacturer of the engine, could be Franklin or whoever. But we have to also look at the wear on the engine as we go past TBO. We can have accelerated wear on the engine that actually may be out of specifications. I know there's a proponent out there that talks about being a couple of 100% over TBO. Unfortunately, he had an engine failure on a twin-engine airplane. He was very, very lucky. But there comes a time when it's just time to open up that engine and look at it to avoid the engine failure. That's one of the things we preach with regards to preventative maintenance. The key in preventative maintenance is to prevent unscheduled maintenance. Also, when we're talking about TBO, we have to look at reliability and peace of mind. For those of you that are instrument pilots and you fly IFR and maybe over water, over mountains at night, having the reliability and peace of mind, knowing that the engine has been inspected, is certainly, I think, gives us a good feeling as pilots when we're engaged in those activities. Also, and Continental certainly has not been pushing in this aspect, and this is something that's becoming new, is insurance companies, due to liability concerns, are looking at TBO, and in some cases, the insurance company does require compulsory compliance with TBO recommendations. And
Bill,
that's not.
Bill, I'd like to know for just a second here, if you could try to restart your screen sharing there. We have some folks that are seeing it and some folks that are not. For everybody who is on the call, we are still on the title slide, so you haven't missed anything. But it looks like, since we do have a cursor and some other things, that for some folks we might have to do a quick restart on this and see if that helps.
Not a problem. I'll do it right now.
And for anyone that you will need flash, for anyone that does have an issue after that, we will, of course, be recording, and all of this will be available via SocialFlight tomorrow. So certainly apologize for any technical issues. Okay, I think everybody's all set, and there was only no sound because we weren't talking. So, Bill, take it away again. Thank you.
Jeff, are you seeing my presentation now?
Let's see, did you do the restart on that?
I did.
Folks are seeing your screen, it sounds like.
Okay. I should.
Why don't we hop to the first slide, make sure that that's all working, and then we can continue.
Okay, I'll go back to the first slide. Are you seeing that, Jeff?
I think everybody is, so we can begin.
Okay. Going back to why TBO is important, we were talking about insurance requirements for TBO. There are some insurance companies that are questioning where your engine is with regards to TBO. So that's another thing to consider. There are three terms that we need to understand before we really start talking about repowering an airplane with either a Continental or a Lycoming engine. And the terms are overhaul, rebuilt, and new. And these terms are used interchangeably in the industry. They're used, people say rebuilt when they mean overhaul. They say overhaul when they mean rebuilt. And I'd like to try and clear up any confusion about how the FAA recognizes these terms and how you should view that from a practical point of view when talking about repowering the aircraft. First off, an overhaul is an inspection of the engine.
Excuse me, Bill, we are still on your title. I think you do need to restart your sharing. When people said title slide, I thought it was your first slide of your presentation.
No problem. I'll do it right now.
The wonderful world of technology.
No problem. Jeff, it's not giving me, oh, here it is. Never mind. It is now. Okay.
Here we go. Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Sorry about that. I think we're back in business now?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Okay. So we were talking about engine options and understanding the different terms, overhaul, rebuilt, and new. And it's very important that we understand these terms so that we use them correctly. And also when you, the consumer, are evaluating an option at TBO, you need to understand what's the difference between an overhauled engine, a rebuilt engine, and a new. And they are quite different, and they can quite very differently affect aircraft value. So I'm going to try to clear that up, and let's make sure that we understand exactly what an overhauled engine is. One of the first things to remember about an overhaul is just about anybody that has an A&P license technically can overhaul your engine. I talk to people all the time, and they say, well, my engine was overhauled by, so-and-so, and he's been a mechanic for the airlines for 34 years. Well, all this mechanic's ever done is landing gears on DC-9s for 34 years. Do you really want that mechanic overhauling your Continental engine that maybe has never seen a Continental engine other than when he learned about reciprocating engines in A&P school? Remember, A&P license is a license to learn. In my webinar coming up in a few weeks, I'll be talking about competence of maintenance providers. So an overhaul can be done by anyone, and yes, there are reputable overhaul shops, but we also have to be concerned that just because a guy has an A&P or just because he's been working as an aircraft mechanic for 34 years does not mean that he's competent to overhaul the engine. But the mechanic or whoever's doing the overhaul will inspect and repair that engine in accordance with Continental, Lycoming, Franklin, or whoever, but do it within the published service limits of the engine. And all they're bound to do is to comply with those service limits. So you may have a component that's very, very close to being out of spec, but as long as it's in and it's in the goalpost, so to speak, the engine can be overhauled. So that's something to consider when you're talking about an overhaul. Also, an engine overhaul is oftentimes it's a low-ball price, or it's the initial price that you get is just an estimate based on everything being good in the engine. Unfortunately, that's not the case a lot of times. When you go into an engine, the camshaft, the crankshaft, connecting rods, gears may be out of specification, beyond service limits, cannot be reused. And when you take that initial price estimate and you start to add in these things that we didn't count on, oftentimes we will way exceed what the price would be on a factory new or factory rebuilt engine. It happens all the time. We talk to customers that say, wow, I just didn't know. But the initial price is based on an estimate. It's subject to change after the core is inspected. So the condition is established only upon inspection. You remove your engine from the airplane, it's shipped to that overhaul facility, or if the mechanic's doing it there on site, he has to disassemble the engine and he has to measure everything, and then whatever falls out, you have to purchase new, or you have to find it overhauled, or you have to find it as a used part, and go that way with regards to the engine. A lot of times in an overhaul, used parts are used. A lot of overhaulers utilize the same hardware, use the hardware over and over again. And overhauled engines really, even though it may be 0 cents major overhaul, really are, if the savvy buyer will look at it as really a limited increase in aircraft value, and that's how it's looked at in the blue books, is very limited increase in aircraft value. When you're overhauling an engine, parts are used. They can be existing parts from an engine. They can be overhauled parts. They can be parts manufacturer approval, what we call PMA parts, or they could be factory parts as required. Now, the key thing with an overhauled engine is an overhauled engine is continued time in service. What do I mean by that? If I overhaul an engine at 2,000 hours with my A&P license, I take the engine apart and I replace everything under the data plate with new parts from Continental Motors. It is still, and the engine had 2,000 hours, it still has 2,000 hours on it. It's 0 cents major overhaul. Very key point when we're trying to distinguish between rebuilt, new, and overhaul. Overhaul is continued time on the engine. Also with an overhaul, sometimes the warranty gets a little cloudy. They buy parts from this person, they buy parts from this vendor, they buy parts from this vendor, and so the overhauler's got workmanship warranty, the supplier warranty may be a host of many different people that the overhauler has sourced parts from, so it can get very, very cloudy when it comes to that. There are reputable shops out there, and there are shops that provide a good overhauler's warranty, but we just need to be aware of what we're getting. With a factory rebuilt, and this goes for Continental and for Lycoming engines, there's a new serial number issued. The engine has a new birth certificate, and it is 0 time. Only rebuilt and only new can be issued 0 time. Now, there is a slang term in the industry that's used, and it's called the factory reman or remanufactured. The FAA does not recognize reman or remanufactured. It is a slang term that's come up, but the true term that the FAA recognizes in the regulations is rebuild. So a factory rebuilt gets a new serial number, and it is 0 time. The engine is produced to new fit tolerances. When you exchange an engine, you get full core credit, as long as it's a complete engine and it came out of the aircraft as what we call a runnable core. There's full core credit issued, so there's no surprise upcharge for a crankshaft if it falls out. Let me dwell on that for just a moment. If you send an engine to Continental Motors and you took it out of your Cessna 182 and the 0470 was running fine, you send it to Continental Motors, and we inspect it and we decide that the crankcase, the crankshaft, the camshaft, the gears, everything is worn out, there's a cracked case, there's this or that, and we dump the whole engine in the shredder, you still get full core credit. There are no surprise charges that we come after you for. So that's very important. As on the flip side of that, going to an overhaul facility, you may be charged for all those items, and now your $20,000 overhaul is now approaching $40,000. So you're way beyond a rebuilt or new engine. Again, just pointing these things out because they're very important when we as consumers are evaluating how we repower our airplanes. The engine is built from parts that meet factory specs. The factory warranties are very much intact. And if you look at the blue books on the engines and the airplanes, those airplanes with a factory rebuilt or factory new generally bring 15% increased aircraft value. So that right there is something to consider when you're repowering the airplane. Factory new is essentially much like the rebuild. Only difference is that we use all new parts. Full core credit for the complete engine. Parts meet all the factory specs. The warranty is intact. And again, those that determine aircraft value feel that the factory new engine can also enhance the aircraft value by 15%. And that's key, very key in this day and age. Now, when we're looking at the factory, it's very important to note a couple of things when we talk about factory engines. One of the things that we love to do with customers, and any of you out there, we certainly recommend, if you'd like to get a tour of Continental Motors here in Mobile, Alabama, we welcome you to do so. It is a very exciting tour to see the innovations in technology and manufacturing that Continental Motors puts into these engines. It's also fun to take customers, owners into the assembly room and have them try to determine which engines are rebuilt and which engines are new. And it's very, very difficult because just on the cuff, you would not be able to tell the difference. They're guessing. We as employees, there are very key indicators such as data plate color and the engine build book description and things like that, but they're all run on the same line, and they're all treated as if they're new. They all, whether it's rebuilt or new, get new hardware, they get new cylinders, they get new pistons, they get new rings, they get all these things. So it's very, very difficult to tell. Also, with a factory option, there's a minimal amount of downtime. How it works is if you order a factory engine, you can call Continental, or you would, in some cases, Lycoming. You would call the manufacturer. You order your replacement engine. We build the engine. We ship the engine to you so you can continue to fly. Your mechanic gets the engine. He removes yours, puts your new one on, or your rebuilt on, puts the old core in the box, and sends it back to Continental Motors. So it's minimal downtime. Remember, with an overhaul, you've got to remove the engine, you've got to ship it to the overhauler, he's got to disassemble it, then he's got to determine what needs to be replaced and all. So there's a longer lead time, longer downtime, should you decide to go with an overhaul option. Also, I mentioned that Continental Motors increased its time before overhaul on its engines, both for rebuilt and new, 200 hours just about across the board on our engines. And how we did that, many of you probably are aware of the Platinum engine that Continental Motors used to build, and we built engines to very, very tight tolerances. And personally, I thought when we came out with a Platinum engine that what that sent and what that message that it sent to our customers was that we weren't building the best engine that we could build. But we learned from that experience in building the Platinum engine. We learned how to flow match cylinders. We learned how to build things to closer tolerances. As a result of that, we then decided several years ago that we would do away with the Platinum engine, and all of our engines would be built to what we call the Gold Standard line. And the Gold Standard engine employs all of those things that we learned in doing the Platinum engine. And as a result of that work that we did and the tolerances that we hold now, we were able to increase TBO across the board 200 hours on our engines. Those engines that are flown 40 hours a month that are in a fleet operation, those engines are actually qualified for 400 hours. So Continental is trying to do their part to extend these TBOs and help us to get more life out of these engines. Again, the engines are built on the same production line, whether they're rebuilt or new, and of course we've been in this for quite some time, both with engineering, research and development, and historical data on how our engines function in the field. Let's talk about what's in a factory engine, and I think it's important to note. A lot of people talk about balance and they talk about vibration. I guess that's one of the, in my career as a technical service representative and pilot and corporate pilot and all, is that we all want engines that run very, very smooth. And while part of it has to do in this balance and some of these things that I'm going to talk about, it also has to do with how the engine is installed and whether or not that's done properly. But we've made a lot of strides in balance and some of the items that we put into the engine to make it run very, very smooth. And I'm going to touch on just a few of those. Our crankshafts are dynamically balanced within 3/4 grams inches, which is very, very tight tolerance, especially for an engine that in most cases turns 2,850 RPM or less, 2,700 RPM, and in some cases 25. It's not like a Formula One engine turning at 21,000, but the balance that we do is very, very close tolerance. We couple that with balanced connecting rods within 2 grams. Again, in opposing bays, those connecting rods are matched within 2 grams, again, for the purpose of balance and a smooth running engine. And there's the crankshaft with that on. Also, we balance the pistons within 2 grams as well. So again, it's a very balanced engine. There used to be many boutique engine shops that used to take factory engines, and they would employ a lot of different techniques, such as, I guess for lack of a better term, balance and blueprinting of the engine. And that's not necessary with a factory engine, because in a sense you're getting a balanced and blueprinted engine. We flow match the cylinders for volumetric efficiency. That's something we learned with the Platinum engine. So our cylinders are flow matched here at the factory. And we also offer position tuned nozzles on many of our engine models now, coupled with the volumetrically matched cylinders, again, provides for a very smooth running engine. Also, another key thing key item that Continental Motors puts into our engines is vacuum arc remelt crankshaft forgings. And vacuum arc remelt is just a term, VAR, you folks may have heard of VAR crankshafts. It is a very dense forging that is free of impurities. It is incredibly controlled material. This metal, this forging that I'm talking about, is widely used in biomedical, in the aviation and aerospace industries, and it's very, very expensive material. It's very, very dense, and it's free of things like porosity and things like that can lead to defects. Basically, the VAR shaft is very controlled as the molten material comes back to a solid state. That solidification rate, or the rate in which that is occurring, is very tightly controlled. And that's for both our factory and rebuilt engines. Every engine that leaves Continental will have a vacuum arc remelt shaft. If the engine is new or rebuilt, it gets new cylinders. Doesn't matter whether it's new or rebuilt. We do not reuse cylinders at Continental, and the engine is assembled with all new hardware. The factory order process is kind of key when it happens. To kind of go through that, again, you can continue to fly your aircraft. You place an order through a Continental distributor or through Continental Motor Services, which is the MRO that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And in that picture, you'll see our storeroom, one of our storerooms here at Continental Motors, and you'll see some tables, and those are what we call build tables. So when the order comes in, the parts are pulled from stores and they're kitted, what we call kitted, to a table. And the parts, although they're already clean and have been inspected in stores, as they're pulled and put on the table and go to assembly, they're cleaned and inspected again. The engine is then assembled in a state-of-the-art assembly line and dress-out bay operation. It's not the engine doesn't go all the way down an assembly line to be completed. The picture that you see in the slide there is what we call the dress-out bay, where some of the peripheral items are put on, such as the induction system, alternator, turbocharger, or what have you. And the engine is assembled, and then it is put in a state-of-the-art test cell where it's measured for many parameters, 31 parameters in a computer-controlled test cell, and it cannot be overridden. The operator that you see in the picture there, he cannot override the engine and send out an engine, for example, with low oil pressure or high cylinder head temperature or something like that. It's very, very tightly controlled. The engine is then deprepped, it's packed, and shipped to the customer. Right now we're working a lead time of about 3 to 4 weeks from the date of the order to the date that the engine arrives, and that replacement engine crate is used to return the engine core back here to Continental Motors, and that's how the factory order process works. We'll talk a little bit about product support and Continental Motors services. Again, we created Continental Motors services in order to better serve our end customer, and our Continental Motors Services MRO is located across the bay from the factory at the Sonny Callahan Airport, located in Fairhope, Alabama. There we can do aircraft maintenance, and we can do those installs that I talked about, ensuring that the engine is installed properly. We can do annual inspections, we can do STC conversions, horsepower modifications, where we change the engine model, and many of those STCs we can do. Again, many of you heard of Matituck. Many years ago, Continental purchased Matituck, and we have closed the facility in New York, but we moved the engine shop to Fairhope. We now are operating under the name Continental Motors Services. So we have engines in stock, both Lycoming and Continental. We do propeller strikes, lightning strikes, IRAN inspections, which is inspect and repair as necessary. And we do engine overhauls for both Continental and Lycoming. Many of the engines that we do overhauls on for Continental are some of the engines that are no longer in production. So if you have an 0300 or an engine that we don't support at the factory from a production point of view, we can overhaul that engine at our Continental Motors Services facility. And we also, again, do many of the STC conversions and upgrades. We also have a cylinder repair shop at Continental Motor Services that is very, very specialized personnel and equipment to overhaul and repair Continental, Lycoming, Superior, and ECI cylinders. Doesn't matter what the manufacturer is, we can repair and overhaul those components. And right now we're working on a 1 to 2 day turnaround time from the time we get the cylinder to the time we turn it out. In fact, we have done it in the same day. We've received cylinders at 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 4:30 that afternoon, cylinders are on their way back to the customer. We have also added avionics capability. We do a full-service avionics shop. We do retrofits. We have and can cut new panels. When we do a retrofit, take out steam gauges and put in electronic digital gauges, we can completely make a new panel and powder coat the systems. We also give you a CAD drawing of what we've done to your airplane with every installation. And we do a lot there. And again, we created that, and creating this MRO to better serve our end customer, and both from the engine point of view, the maintenance point of view, and from the avionics. So we're kind of a one-stop shop, if you will, for our customers. You can order engines direct. If you're thinking about a factory engine or an overhauled engine, you can call us at the number there on the screen, or you can send us an email at sales@continentalmotors.aero. We'll be glad to quote you an engine on a Lycoming, new or rebuilt, an overhaul, or a factory Continental engine. You can buy those engines direct there. And there's no surprise pricing on that. There's no upcharges. And one of the things that we are running as a result of these webinars is anyone that calls and orders an engine from Continental Motor Services, we're doing a discount of 5% off any of the peripheral items that you need to install that engine, such as an exhaust system or engine mounts or hoses or alternator or turbocharger, any of those things that may not come with an engine. We are discounting 5% across the board for those items that are peripheral to the install. So keep that in mind, and all you have to do is mention that you listened to me for this hour, and you'll receive that. We also are your in-stock source for parts. If you need airframe parts for Cessna, Diamond, Beech, Cirrus, whatever airplane you may fly, chances are we have it in stock. If not, we can get it. We have Continental and Lycoming parts. People that you talk to will be team members that are very versed in what they do. They're there to help you. Many of them are aircraft owners and pilots, mechanics that you're talking to. Also, Continental Ignition Systems, which was formerly Bendix, we have those in stock as well, magnetos, harnesses, and kits. Many people don't know that Continental builds ignition systems, or the former Bendix line of aviation ignition systems, and we do it here in Mobile, Alabama at the factory. And again, our website is a host of information both for your engine, technical support if you have it, customer service, and certainly our MRO there in the center at the bottom. You can contact us at any time with regards to that. Next week we'll be talking more about the hurdles that you face when changing the engine, and we'll talk about the longevity, getting the most out of that, how to treat that engine, how to set it up, and how to perform a good installation, and ask those questions of your mechanic with regards to that installation to ensure that you'll have the smoothest and most reliable engine going forward as you make that decision to repower that airplane. And Jeff, that concludes my presentation for this evening, and I can take any questions at this time.
Sure. So I'll be handling some of that based on everything that people have posted. You can post your questions both on the Q&A tab as well as directly in the chat section. So why don't we go through some of these now? I think there's some excellent questions out there. And again, thanks, Bill. So one of the questions that came up is how do warranties compare between rebuild versus new engines?
That's a very good question. The warranty on a rebuilt engine is 18 months, parts and labor, or to the TBO, whichever occurs first. Many of our fleet customers that operate our engines are never out of warranty. We actually have some of our fleet customers that time the engine out, TBO-wise, before they run out of warranty. The new engine is 24 months, parts and labor, to the TBO, whichever occurs first.
Okay, and the next question that here is, you mentioned a section about balanced flow match parts, etc. Is that the same situation on rebuilt engines?
Yes, it is. Very good question, and that's a point that a valid point that I wanted to make, is that all of our rebuilt engines come with new cylinders, and of course all of our new engines have new cylinders, but they're all flow matched for volumetric efficiency across the board. Good question.
And I know another question that I've heard many times before that is posted here as well is, you did talk about the promotion on joining parts to the engine that you were running, but what does a basic engine actually include, and what does it exclude? I guess probably more importantly is what's excluded. What do you not get when it's shipped to you?
That's a good question. Each engine has, of course, you have an engine model, and then you have a specification. And let's take, for example, a customer with a Bonanza B engine model. It also has a spec number, which is a a digit that comes after that. So if the customer has an IO550B, let's say 89, the B tells me the model, the 89 tells me that it comes with a 100 amp alternator, and it comes with this series magnetos, and it comes with this and that. Most of our engines are what we call a plug-and-play package. We do have some engines that the specification doesn't include an exhaust system, or it doesn't include an alternator. In all cases, the engine will include the base engine, the magnetos, the ignition harness, the spark plugs, the fuel system, and it may or may not come with an alternator. It may or may not come with an exhaust system. But those are few and far between. For the most part, our engines are a plug-and-play package, but it depends upon the spec. If the customer is wanting to know exactly, then what we would need to do is just give us a call, let us know what aircraft you have. If you have your engine serial number that's coming out, if you have that handy, that's useful to us, and we can tell you exactly the case. But the core engine, without question, will have the base engine, the mags, the harness, the spark plugs, oil cooler, and fuel system. Those are not optional.
What about starters, Bill?
Yes, starter motor as well.
Okay. Some other questions here. One of the ones has to do, can you talk a little bit about the initial break-in and test runs that happened at your facility versus what's expected in the field?
Yes, very good question with regards to break-in. Our engines are operated on the test cell for about an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours. The engines are operated at 100% power, and again, they go through some variable power settings that the computer runs the engine on. The engine is not broken in, although the incipient break-in is started in the test cell. We want the owner to provide or to perform what we call a break-in flight. And we have a technical brief on our website with regards to this, and we also publish a bulletin with regards to engine break-in. But basically what we want is we desire a high combustion pressure in the engine during break-in. So we don't want you to baby the engine. We've already tested the engine in the test cell to 100% power, and we've determined that we're shipping you a good engine, so we want you to operate the engine at full power for takeoff, shallow climb, keep cylinders cool. When you get to altitude, we want a 75% power setting with a best power or richer mixture. We want good cylinder pressure, so we don't want you. There's nothing wrong with running lean to peak. We just don't want you running lean to peak during the break-in. What we want is we want a good squeeze of the rings against the cylinder wall to start that incipient wear. In the second hour, we want you to perform 75% power and 65% power, varying that power every 15 minutes for that next hour, again at a best power or richer mixture. And then 25 hours mineral oil we recommend in the engine, and then at the first oil change at 25 hours, you can go to your brand of ashless dispersant oil. And that's the break-in. What happens when people baby the engine and maybe run low manifold pressure and high RPM is the engine cylinders, we put what we call a hone pattern in the cylinders. We purposely scratch in a very methodical form. We purposely put hone pattern or scratches in the cylinder for oil retention. If you operate it at low manifold pressure, you can actually crystallize and form an oil oxide coating within those valleys that we've put in the cylinder. And that can get the ring working like a squeegee on a windshield, moving oil back and forth. And what happens, or what are the characteristics of that, is that the oil consumption never stabilizes. It just continues to use oil. But if people follow our recommendation, we've hardly ever had anyone that did not have a successful break-in and good life out of the engine.
And so, Bill, I assume that there's no difference between engines that are in regular stock certified aircraft versus people sending in engines that are part of STC in order to be worked.
That's correct.
Okay. So let's taking a look here at a number of other questions here. There's a couple of things that have to do with aftermarket I think that it would be good to get some feedback on. And that is, if you could comment on things such as CamGuard, for example, and also things such as, exhaust modifications. But I know CamGuard is something that you're actually doing a program with, and of course they're also another supporter of SocialFlight, and we get a lot of very good information out of them, and it's interesting that you two are working together.
We are working together, and I'm going to tell you a funny story exactly how we got together with CamGuard. First off, there's not a week that goes by that I don't think that there's a snake oil salesman that comes to Continental Motors with a dose of elixir, if you will, that will, you put it in the engine and all of our warranty worries and everything will be over. I was at an air show one time and one of our reps was asked the question by a customer, what do you think of CamGuard? And he answered it in that fashion. And I stepped back and I said, it's hard to make that proclamation, if you will, without really evaluating the product. And I got with Ed Collin, who's a very, very intelligent person with regards to oils, and we evaluated the chemistry of CamGuard and decided that the benefits were credible enough to do a study. So we engaged in an 18-month study with CamGuard to look at the effects of both our engines that are leaving Continental Motor Services. So engines that are repaired or overhauled at Continental Motor Services, we've put on CamGuard if the owner is in agreement to do the study. One of the things that Continental Motors has to do to endorse a product like CamGuard is we have to test it. Does the use of CamGuard in and of itself void Continental's warranty? No. But in order to endorse it, we have to test it, and that's what we're doing, and that's why we entered into that agreement, and the data so far has been very favorable as to the effects of CamGuard. So although it is not an approved lubricant or sealant on our lubricants bulletin, which is SIL 99-2, I think soon that you'll see CamGuard added to that. With regards to some of the other aftermarket items such as exhaust systems and tuned exhaust systems and things like that, there are a lot of modifications, performance enhancing type items out there that are very good, work very well. I just the other day at Continental Motor Services saw a Cessna 182 that had a IO550F installed in an STC and a special exhaust system, and it was one of the quietest airplanes that I've ever heard fly. So a lot of people out there doing a lot of work to maximize what we can get out of these engines, and some of it's good. Some of it's not. There are some modifications that can be detrimental, and I'm talking about supercharging and changing pistons and changing detonation margins in our engines. That can be bad, but some of the more platonic modifications that you've mentioned, Jeff, in the question, we show we show and have shown to work very well on our engines.
Now, Bill, when we're near the end here, one last question I have based on things. You talked a lot about the balancing and the smoothness of these engines. What about prop indexing and with both 2 and 3 blade props when you do that? Does anything change having to do with that?
Very good question. Yes, prop indexing is something that is very important when your mechanic is installing the prop. That information is given by the propeller manufacturer or the airframe manufacturer to limit vibration. There are engines and propeller combinations that characteristically can provide torsional vibration that is perceived in the cockpit, and it can be just a simple matter of indexing, but the propeller manufacturer and the airframe manufacturer, they hold the airframe manufacturer holds the highest of the type certificates, engine and prop combination, but it is not the recommendation of Continental Motors as to its indexing, but rather the propeller manufacturer or the airframe. They are the ones who've done the flight testing on the specific airframe combination with the prop to determine the right way to index it and to minimize torsional vibration.
And any thoughts on prop balancing when it comes to that, especially when getting a newly overhauled engine from Continental?
Very good question. Again, we always recommend that they do a prop balance. Now, we also recommend, if they haven't done so, that the propeller and governor go out for flushing and overhaul before you put that on a new or rebuilt engine or overhauled engine. And even though at a propeller shop those props are statically balanced, we have the capability at Continental Motor Services, and it makes for a icing on the cake, if you will, to ensure that you have the smoothest running engine prop combination possible. Many of the perceived vibrations that you get after maintenance are not internal to the engine, and oftentimes aren't the prop, but rather what we call an isolation issue, where mechanic has a clamp or a cable that is in contact with the engine or the mount that's transferring that into the airframe. It's often perceived as a buzz, or you can feel it in your seat or in the rudder pedals, or the compass is dancing around or something like that. But it is very important. We do recommend that dynamic balance of the prop occur when you repower the airplane.
Well, Bill, thank you so much again for your time this evening. As usual, it's been extremely informative. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We really do appreciate it. It's a community, I think, that's very valuable to general aviation that we have here. We appreciate the fact that you joined us this evening, and thanks again to Continental Motors. This presentation has been recorded, and recording will be available tomorrow via SocialFlight at socialflight.com. Also, you will be getting, for everyone who registered and attended this evening, you will be getting an email that will come out afterwards, and we'll also have a link directly to the event within SocialFlight, and right there it has a section you can click on in order to see the recording of the presentation. And feel free to follow up with any questions that you have, both to Bill as well as myself. I'll try to either answer or forward them directly on. And happy skies to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.